Strobe Studios presents Michael Helgens and Greg Kilberger in The Watson Files. Coming to you from the illustrious Strobe Studios in the heart of America, this is Craig Dahlen. And now, let's join the doctor and see what story he has for us today.
Come in.
Dr. Watson?
Hello, Craig. You remember Officer Weathers.
Of course. Max, how have you been?
Good, Craig.
And to what do we owe this pleasure?
Well, this week's story was unusually special to Officer Weathers, so I asked him to come along and help me tell it.
Well, that is a treat. So, Max, what is the story about?
Well, I think it'd probably be best if I start with a bit of history. Back when I was first on the job, there was a teenage girl who had gone missing. Now, I happen to know her mother, so she called me for help.
Do they usually allow you to work cases where you know the victim?
Nah, it wasn't like that. I had arrested her mom a few times. She was sort of a rowdy kid, and I picked her up on a couple of MIPs and a DUI. But she'd straightened herself out when Maddie came along.
Maddie was the daughter.
Right. So her mom calls me, and I look into it. Now, these cases usually end up being a runaway, but I didn't think so this time.
And why not?
She didn't take anything with her. I mean, no change of clothes, toothbrush, not even a diary.
So you're thinking kidnapped?
Right, so we started asking around and find out she walked home from school with a couple of friends. They watched her walk into the house before they left, and her mother insists she always locked the door. There were no signs of forced entry, so we figured she must have left it unlocked. And from there, every lead we followed came up empty. We talked to the neighbors, showed her picture around town, scoured the house for any prints, talked to gas station attendants, checked traffic cameras. Nothing. No one saw her.
So did you ever find her?
Yes, unfortunately she turned up in a shallow grave 3 months later. But we found no new evidence, so that was that.
Except it wasn't, of course.
Right. 26 years went by, and I had all but given up on finding out the truth when Officer Rankins came in with some new evidence for me. Knowing that a case this old can often present a unique set of challenges, I called Holmes in to assist. Holmes, Watson, thanks for coming.
Of course, Max.
What's up?
Well, we have a new lead on an old case, and I thought you might be able to lend a hand.
Okay, what's the case?
A girl went missing 26 years ago, and we never really had much evidence, but now all of a sudden there's been a DNA match.
Why now?
Officer Rankins was working on a homicide over in Dyersville, and when they went to put the victim's DNA into the system for exclusionary purposes, we got a hit.
And I take it you didn't have a match back when you first worked the case.
We didn't even have DNA back then, but when it started being a valid form of evidence several years later, I had them run it, and no, there were no matches.
So the culprit wasn't in the system.
Right.
But now the guy who was killed,
Jerry Render.
his DNA matches your killer.
It's just a partial match. The DNA was pretty degraded, but yeah.
So now you know who the killer is. What's the problem?
He didn't do it.
How do you know?
Did you look into him during the initial investigation?
No, but we did look closely at the girl's next-door neighbor, and his alibi involved a security video at the local casino. He was playing blackjack the afternoon the girl went missing. Mr. Render was a supervisor on the casino floor and is also in the video. Not the whole time, but he was there.
So the question is, how did Mr. Render's DNA get on the dead girl's body?
Or rather, in the body. It was an apparent assault, but yes. I could just assume he's the murderer and close out the case, but I'd prefer to do this right.
Well, this does sound like an interesting case. I'm glad you called.
So where would you like to begin?
May I see the file?
Of course. Here.
Thank you. So the girl was last seen arriving home after school at about 3:45.
Right, she walked home every day with a couple of kids from the neighborhood.
Sarah Johnson and Bobby Render.
Render?
Yeah, Jerry's his dad.
So Mr. Render would have known the girl.
Most likely.
And then it looks like the mom found her just before 5 o'clock.
Yeah, there's just over an hour unaccounted for. We asked around and no one saw her. So we were pretty sure she stayed home and someone grabbed her there.
Was there any sign of a struggle at the house?
Nothing.
So how could Mr. Render get inside the house and grab her without leaving any evidence of the crime?
And why?
Well, I guess I always just assumed the crime was sexually motivated, considering the type of DNA we recovered.
That seems about right.
But it seems unlikely that such an offender wouldn't have had other victims. Was Mr. Render suspected in any similar crimes?
No, his record is remarkably unblemished, actually. He appears to be a decent guy.
And what about the friends? Would they have had any reason to lie about the time they arrived at the house?
No, the three of them were pretty close. They'd all lived in the neighborhood since they were little. The Three Musketeers, as their parents called them.
What is it, Holmes?
Max, is there any chance Bobby and Sarah still live in the area?
Yeah, they're still in the same neighborhood, actually.
Both of them?
Yeah, in fact, they ended up getting married.
I think I'd like to talk with Bobby, see what he has to say about his dad.
All right, but Holmes, you have to be nice.
Of course, Weathers. I wouldn't ever be anything else.
No, Holmes, I mean it. Remember, Bobby's dad was just murdered, and we don't even have much in the way of proof that Jerry killed anyone. So tread lightly, all right?
Officer Weathers, hello.
Hi, Bobby.
It's been a while. How have you been?
Good. This is Spencer Holmes and Dr. Jack Watson. They're associates of mine. Is it all right if we come in?
Yeah, sure. Have a seat.
Bobby, what's going on?
Hi, Sarah. We just had a few questions, if that's all right.
Sure.
Is this about my dad? 'Cause I heard the guy confessed, right?
I'm not involved in that case, so I'm not really at liberty to divulge any information.
Then why are you here for? You're not still on Maddie's case, are you?
Yes, actually, there's been a bit of a development.
Oh, did you find the guy?
Let's cut to the chase. Bobby, why did you kill her?
Holmes!
Excuse me?
Well, it seems pretty obvious, doesn't it?
Holmes, what did I tell you?
I think maybe you should leave.
Look, I hate to have to tell you this, but your father may have been involved with Maddie's death somehow.
No way. I don't believe it.
We got a partial DNA match. The sample was fairly degraded, but they're pretty sure.
Pretty sure? That's all you've got?
There's no way my dad could have done it. He was at work all day.
You're right, he was.
So I ask again, why'd you kill her?
Me? Well, it was a partial match after all, and you do share half your DNA with your father.
That's not exactly true, Watson, but you've got the gist of it.
Look, I think there's been some kind of mistake. I didn't kill anyone.
Then how do you explain the DNA?
Well, was it, sperm? Yeah.
It was.
Okay, fine. Sarah and I dropped Maddie off in her house, just like we said, but then after Sarah went home, I doubled back.
You never told me this.
I know, Sarah. I'm sorry.
Continue.
I had told her to meet me out back by her dad's old woodshed, and well, you know. You were intimate? But I didn't kill her, I swear. I loved her.
Then why didn't you tell us this before?
I was scared. I was 16, and then once I'd lied about it, I couldn't change my story.
It's all right, Bobby. Yours wasn't the only DNA found on the body.
Well, the other person must have been the killer then.
Most likely.
Well, who was it?
Well, we didn't have the technology back then. But when we got the match to your father, I asked Weathers to run the other sample through the system again.
Yep, sure did.
And it turns out the other sample was from a woman, and not the victim.
A woman?
Sarah, would you like to jump in here?
Me? But what could I?
Sarah, it may have been some time ago, but I'm afraid there is no statute of limitations on murder.
Are you crazy? Sarah wouldn't.
Well, then she won't mind giving us a DNA sample, will she?
What?
Well, if you have nothing to hide...
We don't have to put up with this harassment. I think you should leave.
I'm afraid you do, actually. This is a search warrant allowing us to collect a sample of your DNA.
You can't force me to...
No, I can't, but a judge can. It's just a simple swab of the cheek.
And then you'll leave us alone?
Of course.
Bobby, what are you doing?
Just let them swab you quick so we can be done with this.
But
What's the problem, Sarah?
All right, fine. I did it. And I do it again.
Sarah? How could you?
It wasn't fair. We were the Three Musketeers, and then you and Maddie had to go and fall in love.
I'm sorry. It's not like I meant for it to happen.
So you just accidentally slept with her?
No, that's not what I meant. But how did you even know?
I saw the look you two shared when we dropped her off at home, so I followed you back, and I saw you in the shed out back.
Sarah, I'm sorry.
All right, you're gonna have to come with me.
Okay.
And thank you for the confession, by the way. I would have been in a tight spot without it.
But I thought...
Ah, yes, well, my electric bill probably would not have held up in court as a subpoena.
You mean you lied?
Yes, my proverbial pants were once again on fire.
Really, Holmes? We're recycling jokes now?
A wit like mine is timeless, Watson.
Right, well, if you two are done with the jokes, I'd like to continue arresting her now.
Of course.
So, she was killed out of jealousy?
Indeed.
It's a motive as old as murder itself.
Well, I'm sure Weathers was glad to finally provide some closure to the girl's family.
Her mother was very appreciative.
Good. So what story will you have for us next week?
Next week, I'm going to tell you how a couple of gypsies, a cheetah, and a baboon get tied up with Holmes.
That sounds very intriguing.
Ah, yes, I remember that one. You'll enjoy it, Craig.
I can't wait. Tonight's Watson Files adventure was written by Scott Strosahl. Spencer Holmes and Dr. Watson were played by Michael Helgens and Greg Kilberger. Additional voices were provided by Steve Rimpici and Beverly Mead. Until next week, this is Craig Dahlen saying good night from Strobe Studios.
I'm like Mighty Mouse. Or Underdog.
Underdog.
There's no need to fear. Spencer Holmes is here.
Right. Well, if you two are done with the jokes, I'd like to continue. That's not me, it's Weathers.
Hey, I like that voice. All right. Hey.
That was painful.